Can you hear me now, guys? Hello. My apologies, guys. That is going to be one of the worst, like 9 minute starts that I've ever had. Looks like the uh, technical difficulties. Looks like my mic was switched off, and that's something that, I'll go and learn with the process as it goes through. So, my apologies again. As you know, this is not easy, and there's a lot of things that can be able to give off that. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Apito Zone. It's 10 minutes or 9 minutes after 10, and we're gonna start off with basketball. As we know, the Knicks are just coming off of a hard loss to OKC, and they 103 to 100. The main takeaways that I take away is once again Carl Anthony Towns getting fouled out. Not a good look, especially in a big time game against the OKC that is the defending champions on a national game on ESPN that everybody was watching and looking out for. And once again, just not enough from a production standpoint. It's gonna, the box score and everything else is gonna look like, this was just another game where Carl Anthony Towns was inconsistent. The whole team kind of didn't play well. The person that I mentioned earlier that I felt was the best player on the court was OG Anunoby with all of his responsibilities and what he had to do, and the fact that the game was still close by three. It's not the end of the world. As you guys know, it's still plenty of season left, and this is the defending champions. But from a city that's been starved for a championship and wanting to go to that next level, and this has been a team that's been wanting to go to that next level, and this was pretty much decided even while last year, because the reason they made the move from Tom Thibodeau and decided to go in a different direction was because they decided that the next step was to be a championship contender, and that's been the evolutionary process. When Leon Rose came in with Tibbs, the first year they made the playoffs. Second year they kind of took a bit of a step back. Third year, they actually make it all the way to the conference semifinals where they destroyed the Cleveland Cavaliers, who everyone wanted, the Knicks to trade, to empty out the whole roster to trade for Donovan Mitchell, which would have been a bad idea, and it still would have been a bad idea. And the fact that they went on to another conference semifinals appearance, lost the lost the series to the Pacers. That many feel that if they would have had any type of variety of OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, or any type of player that could have been there to make the difference. But at the end of the day, it's still a loss. And when they lost in the conference finals, it was kind of that first taste of the Knicks actually being a championship contender. And when you have the city in this type of fever pitch, the high criticism is going to come. And, when it comes to Mikal Bridges' performance tonight, I was thoroughly unimpressed. The inconsistency from him needs to be improved. And it, the player comp that I constantly make for Mikal Bridges, and when they made the trade, was I thought he was going to be more of like a Rip Hamilton, and from the in the Detroit Pistons, fame, and being that person that sets up the screens, fights through the screens, has that defense that is not at the same level of OG Anunoby, but almost comparable. And the offense, since he was more of a consistent shooter than the younger Knicks that we had, whether it was a Quentin Grimes or a RJ Barrett, we were expecting that consistency to still transform through. I wasn't expecting them to be a 20-point scorer or a superstar or an all-star when they made that trade, but the Mikal Bridges that we're getting now is I'm just a little concerned, and those are the two trades that people are going to constantly, hammer into as the reason why the Knicks are not, set up. So I want to thank you guys for definitely commenting on the stream, the chat. Please send me your thoughts if you guys watched the game. What did you guys think of the game? What was, your take back, your feedback? And also, thank you guys for helping me out with the sound check. I did not, I was just talking on and on and on and not realizing that. So thank you guys. So I got Christian Arguello, 9356. Bridges playing for BK made him look better than what he is. You know what? I can see why that can be a takeaway, and the reason I can see that can be a takeaway is because when you're playing on a bad team and there's not a lot of talent around you, and it can make certain players that who may be quote unquote, I don't want to say average because he's not an average player, he's in the league, but make someone who is average look like a star, make someone look like a star, when really, when you're on a championship team and there's more focus, or you're on a playoff team, there's more focus on you, you're not going to have those same type of that same type of success when you're the primary ball handler. Raw Stout 2545. I'm straight disappointed by Bridges. Not worth the incredible investment. And yeah, I understand, because Mikal Bridges, those 5 first round picks were a very big, hefty price. One being the fact that those were, yes, they were going to be, late first round. They were some of them were lottery protected picks, and since they were Knick picks, they were going to be used in the later rounds if they make the playoffs. But at the end of the day, that was the ammunition in the war chest, so to speak, to make a trade for a future superstar. And now with Giannis coming available with the Bucks, and you don't know what's gonna happen in even the next 6 months, what other superstar may be disgruntled, or may want to look at the New York situation as something for them. You might it's something that they could have been able to have a little bit more. And you know, it's one of those situations, because if I ask the Knicks fans right now, who would you rather have, Dante DiVincenzo or Mikal Bridges? And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell me Dante DiVincenzo. And that's going to be a situation where, not only did they invest the 5 first round picks, they paid the New York tax, quote unquote, speak, by giving the extra picks over. They also they doubled down and re-signed them to a massive extension, and that extension is just we're not even entering in the first year of that extension, as so it's just a situation where it's like he definitely has to ball out, and it is one of those things where, yeah, I can understand, Roll. The investment was bad. And so when it comes now, the Knicks, for overall, they have been playing well. When they do lose, it looks like it's the end of the world, but they are coming off of a situation where after they won the NBA Cup, they went on a massive losing streak, which kind of has, killed the confidence of some fans. And then they kind of went on a run where they've been very good. But when you face the Detroit Pistons, the Oklahoma City Thunder, It doesn't look other than the Spurs or the Denver Nuggets, who are the other top teams in the Western Conference. Other than them, it looks like those are the only teams that we have matchup favorabilities with. While the Cavs are still showing that they still have a matchup advantage with the Knicks. The Oklahoma City still proving that they're the best team in the NBA, and then you have you know, Detroit Pistons, who we have not been able to solve. And not only we have not been able to solve, we have gotten crushed. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season comes through. I do think that Mike Brown might be in a situation where he does need to try to, figure this out and solve, the problem. We'll talk a little bit about what happened today in hockey. The New Jersey Devils came up with an overtime win, 4-3 against the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm not. Wow. See, look at that. That is just so bad on me. The Toronto. Wow. There we go. All right. So let's just move that on. The Maple Leafs, and we're just gonna go and go on because they did lose to the Penguins over the weekend, and then they beat the St. Louis Blues, and it's they started showing some flashes when they beat the Blues 3-1, and then yesterday they came off of a huge win versus the Panthers, and they kind of beat down the Florida Panthers. The Panthers are not the same two-time defending champions as we saw the last 2 years, and the years that they've kind of taken a step back, injury wise, and you can see that evidently. And this game today, they showed a lot of fight. They were definitely trying. The goal scoring has definitely went up since last time we spoke here last Wednesday. Can they make a late playoff push? It's looking more likely not so much, but we'll see. There's plenty of, it, don't want to say it's over till it's over, but we all know that there's a lot of teams that they have to jump over in a short amount of time. So we'll see how it works out. Looking ahead as we speak, both the Devils and the Knicks are the Devils will be facing the Rangers Saturday afternoon, and that's a rivalry game. So expect a big energy, and then they'll be facing Detroit on Sunday night, the Detroit Red Wings. The Knicks, uh, when I looked at the schedule, it looks like they have pretty much 5 games in 1 week. They just finished, losing to OKC. Right now, they've got Denver on Friday night, then brutal back-to-back in LA with the Lakers on Sunday afternoon, and the Clippers on a Monday night, and um, and that's going to be a tough stretch, and we can see why sadly, we're going to hear the term more rest management and stuff like that. So we'll see how that works. But hardwood and ice, we're gonna go to the Global Diamond. We're kind of days away from the World Baseball Classic. We see some of the highlights going off for the exhibition games where you have the Major League Baseball teams, facing off against some of the countries that are in the World Baseball Classic, and James. uh, that's a good one, Chimbo. So we went. They're gonna be starting off on. It starts on March 5th, where it looks like it's opening up on March 5th with a couple games. Chinese Taipei versus Australia is what I have marked down, and then on March 6th, there's the pretty much the rest of the pool play. And we've got some of the games that I have marked down if they haven't been updated or changed. Dominican versus Nicaragua, Puerto Rico Puerto Rico versus Colombia, and USA versus Brazil. Those are the three, countries that I'm following. So, so to speak, as you can see in some of my, social media profiles, those are the nationalities that I represent. And this is one thing I do love about the World Baseball Classic, especially with it being in March. Is this is it? It is in spring training, and since there's a national pride going on for it, there's a lot of you can see the intense competition and the rivalries that get formed up within these couple weeks, and it's something that a lot of players are actually used to because they have been exposed to this international competition at a younger age. One of the storylines is can Japan repeat? Or will or and what I'm hoping for is if one of the nations I'm following can repeat. But because the DR lineup on paper, I definitely seen it. It's definitely explosive. Soto giving a taste by hitting a home run yesterday. Then Puerto Rico's pitching depth is something definitely to look out for, and USA is just very balanced and dangerous. I do think that USA definitely has one of the best teams, but people still say the odds are definitely Japan, and it's still the machine. All right. Let me get to some comments here. I'm seeing Derek Santiago 3659 saying "Bring it home, PR." So he's definitely going for Puerto Rico. And then Matthew Rivera, first game's happening right now. Yes, it is. It is happening right now as we speak, March 5th, and 10 p. It started at 10 p.m. Matthew Rivera 9:26. So and when it comes to the popularity of the W World Baseball Classic, I think that there's definitely a disconnect with mainstream media. It kind of spawned with a ridiculous talking point of World Baseball Classic, and does it really matter, and does the people have pride, do fans have pride in it? And since it was just a very new concept, it was just very easy to reject at first. And you know it didn't also help when you had major key injuries from certain players where, for Yankee fans, Teixeira, I remember when Teixeira got hurt, and then for Met fans, in the last World Baseball Classic, Diaz got hurt, and it's been, a situation where now it's manifested into I don't care about where players where fans will say I don't care about the World Baseball Classic. I don't want to care. You got pretty and hope that none of their players get hurt. And it is what it is, and you're totally entitled to that opinion. I definitely won't try to change your mind, but but I do say that there is a disconnect because of the fact that one, a lot of players who played baseball kind of practically played in that little league, type of format, and they grew up watching the Little League World Series. And if you grew up watching the Little League World Series, you know that baseball is more of an international game, even though it is America's pastime. And there is a national pride when you're playing for an international competition. And we'll see how this works out. And then not only that, just the getting like the casual baseball fans, like last World Baseball Classic, my mom wouldn't root for Francisco Lindor. My mom's a Yankee fan through and through, but the fact that she saw Francisco Lindor playing for her team, she was definitely having a more vested interest in that. So we'll see, it's going on. We'll see how that works. And I think that the fans get it, the identity's there, and the World Baseball Pride is the World Baseball Classic is something that's gonna, keep building, and as long as it keeps making money, it's gonna be here to stay. And we can, complain about the fact that it happens right before spring training, or the players might get hurt or anything else. But you know what? Players might get hurt in the Olympics. For the NBA players might get hurt during the Summer Olympics, and hockey players might get hurt during the Winter Olympics. And when you ask those players, or in a lot of cases, they don't regret playing for their country. It's part of competition and pride, and when people have actually played sports competitively. Um, Playing for your country is something, definitely one of those checkmates. I see here, Wells is 10% Dominican. I thought that was. Thank you for that one, Christian. Christian Otaguayo comments, Wells is 10% Dominican. I thought that was insightful. And then Roll Star 22545. Football is now America's pastime. That I will agree with. With the advent of fantasy football, gambling, and how football is a more made for TV consumption, especially with the attention spans that are of today's viewers. Yeah, you can definitely say football is definitely there. Is there a Pro Bowl of baseball? People don't care that much. uh, Actually, the Pro Bowl of baseball is the All-Star game, and that's actually the most closest thing that you'll get to an actual game in today's day, with all the sports today and their All-Star games. Derek Santiago 3659. A lot of the Yankees are in Italy's coaching staff. All right, so the jokes are coming through right now. And 10 months out of the year now, 10 months out of a year nowadays. Okay. Here we go. So, as we'll return back to the Yankees and the Met talk when the World Baseball Classic does wrap up. I do think that while the World Baseball Classic is in session right now, that will be getting the majority of the talk in the next week or so. But transitioning from shifting from the diamond, we're gonna go straight into the draft board and talk about the NFL draft outlook, because New York Jets and the New York Giants have a big draft coming up. The Jets are picking at 2 and 16, if I'm not mistaken, and at the number 2, it's looking like the pass rusher. They're gonna go pick out a pass rusher, and that does make sense with them making the Jermaine Johnson trade. And at 16, I think that's the wild card. Do they go out? Do they shore up an offensive line? Do they go receiver? Or do they trade back? Or do they, solidify the defense even more? Because there might be more defensive studs out there. And as we know, with the Jets, it's going to be based on their season is going to be determined on what quarterback, what their quarterback outlook is going to be. I would hope that they don't feel rushed to get Ty Simpson at the 16 spot. Definitely not drafting a quarterback at 2. I do think that Mendoza will be drafted to the Raiders, and yeah, it's just one of those situations where that so-called vaunted, great quarterback, great quarterback draft with, Allard and a few others were not, it wasn't, didn't turn out to be, because now it looks like it's just Mendoza, and then everybody else is trying to, go out there. Okay, Apito, what college stood out for you this weekend at this weekend's combine? I'm going to be very honest. I did not watch the combine. I am not a combine hawk, so to speak. So I would be pretty much speaking out my butt if I just tell you, oh yeah, this player impressed me. Like that would be wrong. And Derek Santiago 3659 comments: Will Mendoza actually be good? Um, I don't know if he's gonna be good. But I from what I've saw his games at Indiana this year, the throws that I've seen him make, he does look on point. The ball does get there accurately. I'm not gonna get into the whole, well, he didn't look as dominant as, Joe Burrow. You're gonna get yeah, I'm just gonna have to shake my head at that, because if anyone could tell me from, and I'm not being disrespectful to the Indiana players, um, because they were very talented and they were the best team, in the nation, and they had a very good year, undefeated. But who's Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase on that on the White House at Indiana? Like at this point, I don't know. I'm not going to compare him to Joe Burrow and what Joe Burrow did at LSU, and the that Hall of Fame LSU team and what they did. Indiana was a very good team, very nice story. Underdogs the year before, made a shocking playoff run, and then came back and finished out an undefeated season. Definitely a team for the history books, but I don't I can't ever say that this Indiana team compares up to the what the all-time great teams did. That And with that being said, that's why I think Mendoza might actually be okay. He might be he As far as a player comp, I'm not gonna Kirk Cousins. I'll go more Alex Smith. Because I do think that with Kirk Cousins dropping down in the fourth round, that that Mendoza definitely has a little bit of more cachet and a little bit more, draft stock ability. But we'll see. But I do think that he is a better prospect than Cousins. I think that he's more in that Alex Smith range, Jared Goff range. That's where I see it now. Can he turn into a Matt Ryan or turn into something else? That that's going to be dependent on what the Raiders and Tom Brady do. But yeah, that's answering the Mendoza questions that I'm seeing here in the chat. Um, and then also, is there a franchise guy, or are we looking for another development year class? And that's kind of where it comes down to. I don't think Ty Simpson or any other quarterbacks are going to be um, great guys to develop, so to speak. But we'll see. You never know, and that's why sports is always great. Now, the one thing that I did wanted to bring up here, because oh, Cousins was great at times with Jefferson. Yeah, that one. There was that one year where Cousins was with the Vikings and they made the playoffs. I think that was the year that they lost to the Giants in the wild card game, where they did have a very good year and he was very productive that year. But I think that Kirk Cousins, when by the time he got to the Vikings, he was kind of more on the downswing. And when we saw the play dropped, and the reason that he found himself out of the Vikings very quickly was because they got Kirk Cousins to make a run. And because they had a solid defense, they had the offense. They actually made a run a couple years before with Case Keenum, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason the upgrade for Cousins was to, try to get into the Super Bowl. And that's when he had the injuries, and then they had the playoff year, and then they lose to the Giants, and yeah. Do the Vikings move on from McCarthy? I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because I do believe that that's a situation where, the Vikings are going to be kind of forced to be stubborn since they decided to move on from Kirk Cousins, draft McCarthy, decided to move on from Sam Darnold after the year that they had. That's a situation that it's like, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that situation. And if I'm not mistaken, McCarthy did a very good job with Sam Darnold. I don't know why they didn't, possibly give him like a Daniel Jones type prove it deal to kind of, keep him there and then still keep McCarthy developing. But they decided to, you know, go with McCarthy. They felt like he was ready, and it doesn't look like it. So, and there were a lot of questions coming out of McCarthy with the draft. So this is going to be a situation where um, it might it might cost them. So we'll see. We'll see how that works. Um, One point that I did want to take because the the one point with the Jets, Aaron Glenn, and how much he needs to win, and how much, especially in today's NFL, where everyone makes the case that it shouldn't take this long to improve your team, and it shouldn't take years to improve a roster when you see so many other examples and what I call yada 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 speak. And at the end of the day, when you're passionate about your opinion, you're gonna find whatever example that you like, and that's gonna be able to try and put your spin on it, and that's okay. To each his own. Aaron Glenn is going to lose that job. Yeah, that's most likely because from my experiences is uh, as a Jet fan, my owner is not a very patient owner, and he does like to listen a lot to the media clippings and what and does listen to a lot of what the fans want on social media, and sometimes that can be a detriment. So we'll see how that works. And the one thing that I will say is there are going to be certain situations where you do have to give patience, and you do have to give time, and you do have to let people actually do their job, and it is going to take. And with this Jet, and I think what frustrates me as a Jet fan throughout this whole time is that we're constantly in a cycle where it doesn't improve. And when you're dealing with the fan base that doesn't that is ultimate negativity, and you're you're looking and grasping like, well, if the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo in the first year, why can't we do that? Because we're not the Patriots. We're not a six-time Super Bowl. We're not. We don't have all the Super Bowls, and we don't have all that history, and we don't have. And Woody Johnson is not Robert Kraft at the end of the day. And when you have two different reputations and two different things, you're going to be able to garner an interest, a different coaching candidacy. Like right now, if the Jets did, let's say if the Jets did fire Aaron Glenn, I highly doubt Mike Tomlin or Harbaugh is looking at the Jets. They're not going to be looking at the Jets. They're not going to even respect that, respect it as it is. You know, Mike Vrabel may be, um, gutless enough to, go after his best friend's job in Gerard Mayo, but hey, hey, that's him, not me. Now let me stop playing around. I don't know what's going on. But it's a situation that you have to be able to play it out. And the only comparison that I can make is, yeah, Dan Campbell did start off bad with the Lions, and it did take a while in year two to come back. Also, a comparison that people really hate, me throwing out there is Zach Taylor of the Bengals. He He had a horrendous record those first 2 years. You can say that, well, he had Joe Burrow in the second year, so they kind of knew. Yeah, but they didn't really know, and that was coming off of a that was and Zach Taylor was coming off of replacing Marvin Lewis, who had the highest winning percentage in Bengals history. So it's kind of a situation where it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I would if this is a situation where Aaron Glenn and Muji are being told to wait for the next year's quarterback draft, then I am a person that, yeah, I have no problem in seeing how this, I would like to see an improvement, but I'm not gonna, flip out if, Aaron Glenn actually stays here for another year. So we'll see. But let me get to the questions because I see here they're piling up. Ownership needs to see that least the has to at least see nominal improvement. That I do agree with. I'm a person that says, hey, they won 3 games last year, and no matter what people will try to tell you, the reason they won 3 games last year was because the roster wasn't as good. And we tried to talk up the roster. We tried to talk up the defense. We tried to talk up all the pieces. But at the end of the day, they won 5 games with Aaron Rodgers. And if they won 5 games with Aaron Rodgers, I'm sorry. The issue was more than, there was just a delusional mindset. And I was part of that delusional mindset. I thought they were going to win, 7 to 8 games and possibly, have that surprising first year. After the first week, I was like, yeah. Then second week after that game, I readjusted my expectations quickly because I just knew that it was just a very bad talented team. I wasn't too impressed with the linebackers. Don't care if Quincy is if Quinn's brother. Sorry, I'm not into that. I'm not into those little storylines like that. If you if the defense is not getting it done, it's just not getting it done. And with Salah, they were getting it done. And I am going to transition to that next question. With Salah, they were, showing some improvement, but there was also a lot of pieces, a lot of depth pieces that were there that were kind of pretty much let go and, piece by piece. And it was to get players like a Randall Cobb and a Devontae Adams and a Alan Lazard and all of those pieces that pretty much, ended up not doing very well. Or, and with the exception to Devontae Adams, he did have a good season with us, but still, it was when you made all those moves, it was to make a playoff push and to try to get into the Super Bowl, and it ended up being a abject disaster. And the one thing I've always said is when you try to take shortcuts, and even if it's a popular shortcut, when you try to take shortcuts, when you try and you don't have the investments to actually pay that back when the shortcut blows up in your face, you got to pay it with interest. And sadly, right now, the Jet fans are learning that lesson right now. And I still remember saying that if we went after Aaron Rodgers and it didn't work out, I could see that 13-year playoff drought turn into a 20-year playoff drought. And sadly, it's becoming more and more evident because I'm already seeing the cycle of, the media has already got the axe to grind with Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn didn't do himself any favors with some of, his antics, but at the end of the day, media had it out for him ever since he told Aaron Rodgers to, take a hike. And, they decided to try to make Aaron Rodgers look like this hero for flying out on his own dime when, I'm sorry, Woody Johnson, Rob Saleh, and Joe Douglas flew out on their own dime to go to LA to, convince him to come to New York. So the outrage on that was just nonsense. Sounds like the Jets have a losing culture. Yes, they do. They've had a losing culture for a while. And they've had a losing culture since I want to say since Woody Johnson decided to strip down the Parcells infrastructure, which when they let go of Rex Ryan, they stripped down the whole organization, and they had, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie Cashley, a former executive, kind of rebuild the team, and he rebuilt it with Mike McCagnon and Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles was the right hire for a coaching standpoint, but Mike McCagnon was not a great GM, and then he got rid of Todd Bowles for Gase, and Gase and him didn't see eye to eye, and yeah, it created that whole losing culture. And we're not going to get into the bad draft picks and all of that. That's just too much. Bengals had a lot more talent to develop. Oh no, yeah, definitely the Bengals did. Have a lot more talent to develop. Also, the Bengals did have a lot of carryover players from those previous regimes, so I understand. Make make them fly to us just so you can fire me. Aaron had a point. I don't think he had a point. I really don't. With all the nonsense that was pulled and all of the, I'm going to go to Kabul when you had a mandatory date, you made the organization look bad by, missing out on that date. Then you had what I think were clowns, clown commentators, trying to find ways to make it about the Jets and their instability rather than holding Aaron Rodgers accountable, because they promised he wouldn't do this nonsense, and when he did do it, he was kind of given a pass again. And at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, look, just like how I'm getting told, with certain instances of how you treat people in your past, comes back to bite you. I don't know how Aaron Rodgers treated certain people in the past, especially with, the investment that Woody Johnson made, how much, was, how much he stepped in to kind of, facilitate that trade. And for him to just get a, 9/11 preview of Aaron Rodgers running out with the American flag and then snapping his leg in 4 plays and then coming back and not doing what you said you were going to do, which was get in sync with Garrett Wilson, develop him to be, that next player that Devontae Adams is, getting him to, also, helping the Jets actually, end that playoff drought and trying to, create that stability. And at the end of the day, it wasn't there. And I'm not going to be a person that goes out there and says he has a point, when my dude, you were going there. You had to go there. You did not fly out on your own dime. You had a meeting for a job, and just like anything else, they let you go. Gase, ha. Gase is. I'm not gonna talk about Adam Gase. That's just bad. But now we're gonna go to the Giants. Now the Giants, they have an important pick here, and the one thing that I wanted to ask, especially since I know I got some Giant fans like Raul and Christian, do what do you think is going to happen? Do they take one of the stud defenders that's being talked about in this draft, or do they possibly take a running back, or do they have holes in the offensive line depth, so do they go with a you know offensive lineman, or do they go with another backup pass rusher to kind of keep that consistency going, or do they get secondary help? Like to see what you guys are thinking. Right now, I think the best thing for them to do is to get a foundational player on defense. There's not enough of them. One thing that we've learned is, when you get, a player on defense, it can definitely make a big difference. And Christian Arguello, 9356. The name that I'm hearing a lot, especially on the radio, is Sonny Styles, and he is the talk after after the combine. I could see him shooting up, and I know that there were a lot of players that kind of wanted him as a dark horse to. I know a lot of fans that wanted him as a dark horse to possibly slip into the later rounds for their teams, but it's most likely with his in combine performance and everything. I do think that he might be getting picked. He might be getting picked a little higher. So we'll see how it turns out. The bigger question is do they have enough talent to make a playoff push? I maybe a running back, since Scatterboo will play himself out of football running. All right. Oh man. So that can happen. They might go with their running back. Scatterboo's injury it can be a concern, and the head injuries that happen a lot, and it's something that they do gotta watch out for. And the way the style of play, he plays like a madman running through walls. Enough of the videos of him banging his head against a chair. We don't need to do that. And as Derek Santiago times in, Scatterboo, the human CT. Oh man, that's just bad. So we just want to make sure that he's and then that's why I think running back might actually be option to pick. We'll see how it works out, but it is a situation where we'll see how the Giants pick. The reason I asked them, do they have enough talent to make a playoff push, is because with Harbaugh coming in, this is his first year, and I'm not going to have crazy expectations and think that they're going to make a deep playoff push. But I do see that there are a lot of pieces on both sides of the ball where they can possibly make a playoff push. And this is not, something that, is out of the realm, because we always hear that good coaching will lead to, doing things. So good coaching, makes a huge difference in the formation of how the team is set up and how they play on a week-to-week basis, on a preparation standpoint. And, the reason you got John Harbaugh was to kind of accelerate this rebuild process. You got Jackson Dart, your quarterback. You think he's a stud. You think he's ready to, go in and be that, Justin Herbert or, type quarterback, and the reason you get a coach like Harbaugh is to kind of, replicate what his brother did with the Chargers. So we'll see how it turns out. Wanted to hear your thoughts. How many games do you think the Giants are going to win, and do you think he needs to? Derek Santiago, he needs to learn how to slide. I'm guessing that's for Jackson Dart. Yes, Jackson Dart does need to learn how to slide. It's something that does need to happen. He's definitely can't be the tough man, because eventually these guys will knock your lights out. And what he's already been on concussion protocol way too many times. The league is going to be looking out for it, and he's just got to be very careful and make sure that he still stays upright and plays on the field. And the draft decides, and to me, I think this draft decides if the Giants can be a serious team. I do think that with the transition of them moving away from Joe Shane and moving towards Harbaugh and the staff members that they picked up, I do think that this is going to be a situation where the Giants can be able to make some moves and possibly get right back into the swing of it. And here, right now, it's time to go around the zone, and we're going to be talking about, and in our around the zone section, we kind of talk about different sports. We got UFC 326 coming out, Holloway versus Oliveira, March 7th. I call this a striker's chess match. Max Holloway's volume, Charlie Oliveira's submission and chaos. Odds, favorite expensive, but this fight, it's about adjustments. It's about adjustments and how each of them adjust and make sure they can be able to control their pace and what they do. If Holloway controls his pace, he wins. If Oliveira turns it into a scramble war, it's going to be a different story. We'll see how it works. Oliveira's more of the grappler. Holloway's more of the striker, and Holloway has been definitely a person that definitely knows how to put people to sleep. And hopefully, this can be an entertaining fight. Also, now, don't know how many of you guys are wrestling fans. WrestleMania 42 is coming up. WWE is building towards April 18th and April 19th. The reason I wanted to give some credit is because at the end of the day, when it comes to why do I talk about these sports? These are sports that I'm interested in. I'm a fan of, and I kind of just want to, give, a little bit of, just be able to give a little bit of talking segment for it. And the one thing that I've been very impressed with WWE and WrestleMania 42 and the build up for it is the Roman Reigns versus CM Punk storyline. I've been saying that this has been a long storyline of 10 years in the making. The promo yesterday is long story. The promo yesterday and the promo a couple weeks ago is long storytelling done right. And the reason it's long storytelling done right is they're not afraid to push the lines and make it seem like it's real. And the animosity between these two talents is actually very real. People, when you're working for a big entity and people are very competitive, you're going to see a lot of those competitive rivalries get built out, developed, and seeing how CM Punk handled his situation by going to his former best friend's podcast and deciding to rip the company. Did he have all right to rip the company? Yeah, he was in his feelings, and he has his right to say, what he was feeling, how he felt like he was being done wrong. And there was nothing wrong. I didn't have anything wrong when he was, voicing his displeasure when it came to the WWE management and stuff like that, where I kind of raised my eyebrow and kind of felt like he was being a little bit more disgruntled was when he was kind of making him sound like he was like this prophetic figure where he took two of the hottest independent wrestlers that were superstars on the independent trail while he was working in the independents was insane. And and the fact that Seth Rollins even has kind of said that that wasn't really happening. It kind of pretty much made him look like, yeah, you're drinking your own Kool-Aid a little too much. And then not only that, he definitely mentioned Chris Hero's name to try to pretty much make Roman Reigns' life a little harder, and the whole make Roman look good, all of that stuff. And that's where I said, and that's when I've noticed, I'm like, yeah, it's not a coincidence that all the boos and all of that, came right after this podcast. And, it kind of did make Roman's life a little harder, where that hardcore rabbit fan that missed CM Punk was now starting to act like it was a, protest, and they needed to try to quote unquote hijack the show at every single cost because they just didn't want a Vince McMahon picked out, person to, be the face of the company, when at the end of the day, he was going to be the face of the company, whether he was a baby face or whether he was a heel, whether you accepted it, whether you didn't. And, part of the, jealousy of CM Punk was he saw that the organization was pushing towards him and not pushing in his direction. And you're now going to see that, and we're now seeing that unfold in the promos. We're now seeing it, see the mentor and the, mentor and the mentee relationship kind of playing. And then you're seeing the wrinkles of Paul Heyman, and you're seeing, the wrinkles of, Roman Reigns' family, with CM Punk pretty much saying that he was going to bury CM Punk bury Roman Reigns with his dad, which I thought was crazy, but definitely real. ESPN now covers wrestling. That in itself is wild, and yeah, it is. It's been a long time, but one thing I will say is it's not the first time. Wrestling was on ESPN back when ESPN was first starting. If I'm not mistaken, they used to show AWA promotional matches. So I'll definitely recheck on that. But but for now, but I definitely understand what you're saying. Not for a while, it's been covered, picked up, and a lot of the time. And I think this is also a correlation of the fact that ESPN and WWE headquarters are kind of right next to each other. When you go to Stanford and you get off the train, and you can see the WWE building, and then you can see ESPN is based out in Bristol, Connecticut. So when you see that, situation, and people like Jonathan Coachman, and I'm forgetting, there was another person that I'm forgetting, but when you see people who have gone back and forth, who've worked for WWE and then worked for ESPN in that broadcasting sense, you're going to see a lot of the crossovers and a lot of the connections. And over time, it became a situation where ESPN pretty much saw it as a profitable and marketable thing to kind of, carry them and carry their events. Then next is, if you guys want to talk about this, Mayweather versus Pacquiao 2. Wanted to hear what your guys' thoughts on it was. There's no major update as of yet, but as you guys know, nostalgia sells and boxing knows it. And I think that's why this fight is going to go on. It's set for September 19th. Not looking forward to it, but it is something that I will watch just for the giggles. And I kind of made this reference where these two fighters at the age that they're at kind of reminds me of the Robert De Niro Sylvester Stallone movie where it was just two old boxing guys going out it. So we'll see how that works. Nah, man, the fight is going to do. I love the dot there. So I think the fight will do well from a attraction standpoint. There will be people that will watch it, and there's going to be a storyline. Well, we in the highlights, you can find that there were a couple of punches that Manny Pacquiao did land and possibly hurt Mayweather. You can be able to find that. So if you're able to find a couple of those highlights, you can be able to replay those highlights over and over again and, talk yourself into a scenario where, hey, Floyd Mayweather is a little bit slower. And even though Pacquiao's slower, he was definitely, the more powerful fighter of the two. So, who's to say that, he can't land that one shot and, change everything. But I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see. We'll see. It does create, that type of interesting intrigue. Raw Stout 22545. Not excited. The first fight was terrible. Yeah, it was a terrible fight, and and at the end of the day, it was a terrible fight. One, because Manny Pacquiao couldn't hit him. That's like that's the big thing, and that was why I wanted to see that fight. Hopefully, when they were younger in their prime, but since it didn't happen, and let's face it, my big critique on Mayweather and his career was he was definitely a very good chess master and making sure that he picked the right opponent at the right time where they had been exposed. So he kind of already knew the game plan on what was the best way to beat them going in. There wasn't that, there was, and especially when I felt like he got up to the welterweight division, if you would have told me, you know, he would have beaten Paul Williams and Cotto and all of those guys, back to back to back, and ran through the welterweight division like he ran through lightweight and like he ran through super lightweight and all of that. I would have been a little bit more impressed, but the constant, going from De La Hoya, biggest money match in the field, perfect. Ricky Hatton, very serious right now. Then after that, it got to a point where it was just, a charade of, retiring, then unretiring, facing Victor Ortiz, I'm just like, yeah, it was just a point where I was just like, I couldn't take those years in the Floyd Mayweather year. I was like, okay, this is the best thing I'm ever watching. He's great, one of the greatest boxers I've ever seen, but I can't, say greatest of all time or anything like that. When you got to be able to fight everyone, and it can't. And when you seem like you're ducking, it seems like you're protecting a record, and when you're ducking, it doesn't look good, and it doesn't matter how many of your sycophants try to justify it. People know what a duck looks like. Uh, as we're transitioning, we've also big news coming up with WNBA. The deadline for the owners and the players leadership is coming up within the next week, and there was a poignant letter from the players leadership sent out to the media. I'll be going over that more as for next week. But we're getting into the final whistle, as so to speak. Um, and what is this stream, and what is the Apito Zone? It's not just a sports show. It's commentary. It's commentary with layered with perspective, and it's breaking down my favorite teams beyond the surface levels and the hot takes. As I grow into this journey, you will be seeing me try to strive to make more improvements throughout the show to give more detailed analysis breakdown, and also get some, hopefully get some guests in the future. Why did I call it the Apito Zone? Well, part of it started, for giggles. I never really saw myself doing a sports live stream or podcast or whatever we call it today. But I never saw myself doing any of this on a consistent basis. But as people told me and, were asking me to do things, and I started looking in my old Twitter posts, I remembered that I created a thing called hashtag Apito Zone as a joke. And it was something that, a little bit of an insider for me and my fraternity brothers. And I just decided to say, hey, and I remember saying, hey, what if this was a podcast? And, I tweeted it out into the Twitterverse and ended up seeing that tweet. And I just said, I guess I'll just go with this topic with this title. The word when you look up the word apito online, the first thing you'll see is the word whistle, and that's kind of why I call this segment the final whistle. But when you look into it deeper, you'll see a lot of like Taino meaning and its relation to the word infinite. And the reason that I like the simulation is because sports debating is always it's an infinite cycle. We always say history often rhymes. So does sports takes, and we kind of see the history and the patterns that go within the narratives, and how certain bad narratives take over, and how certain thoughtful narratives take over, and we have to. And what I wanted to do is to kind of create a show that can be able to not only separate that, but be able to have and the discussions here are going to be infinite. The debate here are going to be infinite, and as far as I just wanted to kind of create that and not keep score, so to speak, but keep hey, if there's a take that ages badly and I see it kind of being repeated, almost 5, 6 years later, and it's going to be, regurgitated and taken as gospel, then yeah, of course I'm going to be a person that's going to say, hey, I don't think this is going to be something that's going to, work. And if it annoys people, if it gets people upset, then maybe this is not the forum or the place for you, but this is going to be something that we can go that we're going to be doing here as time goes on. As far as me getting being comfortable in this space, as far as with my social media antics and stuff like that, I'm not going anywhere. And the one thing that I've learned is when you make a presence and make a space, it can be able to upset certain people. And I know I'm not the best communicator in a lot of situations, and I can be an acquired taste in a lot of situations. Uh, but my opinions and my passion on my sports teams are what they are. And you can try to delegitimize me or try to dissect me, try to go into my past. Uh, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change the fact that I'm have a social media presence. I'm going to use my Twitter account. I'm going to use my IG, and I'm going to use my Facebook, and I'm going to talk about the things that I'm going to talk about. And if it upsets certain people, I understand that. We can definitely have a discussion. We can definitely, and I am always into listening to people's perspectives. I'm not a person that likes to dismiss people, but I am a person that is very strong in my beliefs. Um, and the one thing I will say is sometimes if people used that same, if they use that same energy to try to delegitimize someone, if we use that same energy towards the product and the craft, we might have better takes, and that's just my opinion. Passion doesn't equal obsession, but it equals care. And if you take age poorly, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. I want to thank you guys for your time. This has been the Apito Zone, where the takes are supposed to be layered and the passion is real and the whistle never stops. So, see you next time. And I want to thank you guys and have a great day. Great rest of your night.